remotely. Hi, this is the Bear. Welcome to another lecture. This time remotely, of course. This is on project number 12. We're going to cover asset protection planning and also the use of life insurance and estate planning to some degree. First, let's discuss the fact that there's a lot of exemptions out there if you file bankruptcy. Certain debts cannot be discharged. For example, right now, student loans cannot be discharged in bankruptcy, but most other debts can be. Um, and from that standpoint, there are two types of exemptions. One is federal exemptions, and there's a whole list of that, and there's another list for state exemptions. An exemption that we've previously studied is the tenancy by the entirety's property. It's not really an exempt asset, it's just you can't foreclose on it with a lien. That's a state exemption, not a federal one. Whenever somebody goes into bankruptcy court, they have to choose whether to use the state list or the federal list. Probably the biggest exemption out there is for retirement plans, including pensions. This also covers 401k, 403b, and other types of retirement plans and IRA accounts and Roth IRAs and the like. If you save within a qualified retirement plan with an employer, those are 100% exempt regardless of value. If you roll them over into a rollover IRA account, then they remain exempt. If you contribute to an IRA account or a Roth IRA account, there's a limit on the exemption amount for those. That's 1,362,000. That limit goes up with inflation. It adjusts every 3 years. There's a similar state exemption, except if you are paying child support obligations, IRAs are not exempt for that purpose. Inherited IRAs, as we've already seen, don't have any type of exemption related to them, which is one of the reasons if you're trying to protect that asset for an heir, you would leave it into a trust. Your client has a 401k, wants to roll it over into an IRA. Should you roll it into a contributory IRA account or a rollover IRA account, and why? And the answer is a rollover IRA. You want to keep your contributory IRA accounts and rollover IRA accounts separate. If you combine them in any way, then the exemption that follows is only 1,362,000. You lose the unlimited exemption for rollover IRAs. So it's very important to keep these two types of IRA accounts separate. How do you do that? Well, it's done on the IRA application. For example, here is one from BlackRock. It says traditional IRA and then rollover IRA. And basically, a traditional IRA account is something you make contributions to, as seen here, and rollover from qualified retirement plans and the like. They have one here for a Roth IRA. Interesting enough, they don't have a rollover Roth IRA. There are Roth 401ks, so I'm kind of surprised at that on the form. Here's a form from Franklin Templeton, and it shows a traditional IRA and a rollover IRA again, separate. And there's a Roth IRA and a Roth conversion IRA, which is interesting. But again, they don't have a rollover Roth IRA, which is probably something they need to fix there. There are other exempt assets in Kentucky. If you file bankruptcy in Kentucky, your homestead, if you use the federal list, is $20,000, $200 of the value of the homestead is exempt. Basically, you might be forced to sell your home, but you keep $20,200. Cash value of life insurance is exempt. That's a huge exemption. Automobiles up to $2,500 in value, jewelry, burial plot, and pension payments and the like. And as we've already seen, 401ks and IRAs are exempt to a big degree. In some states, homestead is fully protected. For example, Florida. If you own a $5 million home in Florida and you've lived there for more than 720 days, it's a fully exempt asset. The same for Texas. So some states, just a few states, have very big exemptions. And a lot of states' annuities are exempt. So, like if you're going out and bought a non qualified annuity, where you put money in and it grows on a tax deferred basis, annuities are exempt, but they are not exempt in the state of Kentucky. Not that type of annuity. If you're getting a pension where you're actually getting annuity streams, there are certain limited exemptions for that. Limited liability companies are treated a little bit differently. As long as it's not a singly owned limited liability company, in most cases, creditors can't seize the limited liability company units of ownership. But they can get what's called a charging order against it, which entitles that creditor to that owner's share of the profits that are actually distributed. Now, most of the time, LLCs are taxed either as S corporations, which is a pass-through type of entity, or as a partnership. And so, if a creditor has a charging order against it, a lot of times what will happen is they don't actually get any money out of the limited liability company because basically the managers at that point would likely not distribute anything. And instead, what they basically get is a K1 form every year that says you owe money on the income that this LLC has earned. And for that reason, creditors basically will not a lot of times put charging orders on limited liability companies because they don't want to have to deal with the income tax ramifications of that. This varies from state to state in terms of how this is enforced. In some states, it's possible to foreclose upon a limited liability company interest. In other states, it's not. Um, Very similar treatment is also given to limited partnerships in many states. You'll see family limited partnerships in an estate planning context. And in some states, family limited partnerships are preferred over limited liability companies from an asset protection purpose or for other purposes. Uh, but you'll see limited liability companies as a way of protecting assets quite often. It's not unusual, for example, to see farms put in limited liability companies. Yeah. So here's an example, Dr. and Dr. Billings. They're both doctors. Mary is an obstetrician in Kentucky, and John is a radiologist. Now, they're both in very high-risk professions. Both of these types of doctors tend to have malpractice claims against them because a radiologist, for example, they're reading many different types of x-rays and other screens every day, and they don't spot something quite often, there'll be a malpractice claim. An obstetrician is a very high risk type of practice. So they're likely to be sued. Each of them maintains the minimum amount of malpractice insurance required by the state that they live in. In some states, it's $125,000 or $250,000. Most states, 32 of them, have a $250,000 limit. Uh, but even that $250,000 of malpractice insurance might cost them $50,000 to $100,000 a year in terms of malpractice premiums on that. State of Kentucky does not require a minimum amount. So, because of the high cost of malpractice insurance, they might decide, I'm not going to do it. They're not going to have malpractice insurance. They make $500,000 a year. They work and live in Bowling Green. They own their home. It's worth $300,000. They don't have a mortgage on their home. It's owned as Mary and John Billings. They each have a 401k account and they can save $150,000 a year, and they want to purchase a small farm that's worth $500,000. Now, neither of them possesses life insurance. They're likely to start a family in 1 to 2 years. What would you recommend to them? Well, the answer is in this case, well, first off, fully fund your retirement accounts. The limit for 401k accounts is $19,500 a year for the employee's contribution. The maximum combined employer-employee contributions are $57,000 a year. So it is quite possible if they have very small medical practices, maybe only 1 or 2 employees, they could put $57,000 a year into that. There are other types of retirement plans that it's possible if you are older and you have a young employee or no employees that you can actually put like close to $200,000 a year in certain types of defined benefit plans. But we'll say that they can put money away, but certainly not that much. On the home, they want to see an attorney. They're going to have to figure out whether they want to hold that as a tenancy by the entirety's property, which would protect it if one of them gets sued from a judgment creditor, which would be likely the case here. At least it provides some limited protection, but they also might want to hold that home in a limited liability company. And when they purchase the ranch, they want to do that in a limited liability company, and each of them be a owner of 50% of that. And for maximum protection, when they have children, they could actually set up an irrevocable trust and gift 1% of that limited liability company into that irrevocable trust. And then they could use the remaining assets that they have to purchase private placement life insurance, because life insurance in the state of Kentucky, the cash value of it, as well as death benefit, is fully exempt. And there are some first to die policies where basically it pays off if when you basically you have life insurance policy on both lives, but it will pay when one of them dies. And there's also last to die benefits, so the life insurance only pays when both of them die, or they could get individual policies as well. Um, and Under a type of insurance called private placement life insurance, the cash value can be invested in brokerage accounts. Uh, Now, private placement life insurance is really typically used when you have very high net worth individuals and they're going to put 500,000 or $1 million or more into life insurance policies. The alternative that's much more commonly utilized is variable universal life insurance policy, which you can basically invest in funds. It's a very commonly available policy, so you can basically put the cash value in different mutual funds that are out there. And uh, so let's discuss life insurance. Some of you may be approached by life insurance companies to say, hey, come and work for us. We've got great internships and the like. Um, there's nothing wrong about selling life insurance, but in my view, um, life insurance, cash value life insurance, as opposed to term insurance, is rarely needed, and I'll discuss that later. So a lot of times you end up selling a very expensive product from the standpoint of its commissions and low rates of returns as a result to people who really don't need it, other than for an asset protection purpose and for one estate tax reason, which I'll explore later. Life insurance, really most people should have term insurance. How do you market this? Life insurance is marketed through financial planning. In fact, the financial planning profession got started over a little over 50 years ago, really by 12 life insurance agents who said, hey, we're providing this, but we need to provide more comprehensive views of people's finances. And that's how basically the financial planning profession got started. A lot of marketing that says create a legacy for those who matter most. Yeah. And here's one from Danica Patrick, who just retired from NASCAR. Yeah. And of course, free consultations. And a lot of life insurance is marketed in conjunction with estate planning. There's things called irrevocable life insurance trust, there's other trusts, and a lot of times you actually see seminars put on by life insurance agents where they have an attorney come and speak. And just another advertisement here on joint last to die policies that pay when both of you pass away and how that fits into an estate plan. And should you consider first to die life insurance policy? A lot of nice pictures. Most insurance agents nowadays don't want to say, I work for Northwestern Mutual, or I work for Mass Mutual, or I work for some other insurance company. They actually use some other type of name for their entity. For example, NSC Financial, Centennial State Financial. Yeah. And of course, there's the seminars and the like. Here's one presented by Keith R. Lyman, LLC. So again, it's not saying I'm an insurance agent. It basically looks like something that is presented by somebody who maybe looks like an attorney, but perhaps is not. Yep. And this says a diversified plan for your financial future must have a solid foundation. Wills and trust at the bottom of that, and somewhere in there is life insurance. Tax advantage life insurance for building net worth. This one says life insurance has changed. There's new products, there's new types of products out there, and to some degree that's true. And this is an ad for using indexed universal life insurance to sell tax-free retirement. And we'll discuss that. And here's just a slide from, this is a PowerPoint presentation slide from Prudential, a dozen uses of life insurance and wealth transfer planning. So a lot of seminars are put on by life insurance agents. And the reason they can put on seminars and invite people to free luncheons and free dinners and put on these seminars is because they make huge commissions on selling life insurance. And the life insurance companies will give them marketing support dollars as well because of all the really high profits of whole life insurance and other cash value types of insurance. Here's another ad, looks pretty. And here's another ad said, look at this, you can grow your money tax free and then take it out in retirement. And this one says, hey, you should probably put your money in an index universal life, not put it in a 401k, which is about the worst advice absolutely possible. They emphasize the tax-free treatment of life insurance, and yes, any cash value inside an insurance policy grows tax-free as long as you die. Yes, they just happen to mention, don't a lot of times mention that part. And here's an objective guide to life estate planning and life insurance. Not really too objective in my view. Here's RJP estate planning. So a lot of people will advertise themselves as estate planners when in fact they're really just selling insurance and annuities. And there's some certifications out there. There's a certified estate planners. If you were to look that up and see the type of education that's required to get that, you would probably find that very little is needed to get certifications. There's like 200 or 300 certifications in financial services, and only a few of them are rigorous. A lot of these symbols are fairly meaningless. Here's another certification, Certificate of Trust and Estate Planner. Yeah, a lot of these are just basically worthless. This guy calls himself a risk management consultant. Yeah. And of course, here's a life insurance agent closing a sale by shaking somebody's hands. Looks pretty promising. Whenever I shake hands with a life insurance agent, I wash my paws and wash them vigorously. In fact, usually I take a big shower. One does not simply end a call at the first no. That is something that you will hear often if you work in a life insurance agent. You don't take no for an answer. You get them on the phone, you get them talking, and there's all kinds of scripts out there to allow you to basically cold call people and sell life insurance. And this is why people avoid life insurance agents, because of all the cold calling and basically then trying to sell you an expensive product that very few people really need. I really want to be an insurance agent when I grow up, said no one ever. So, yeah, hey guys, I got a job with Liberty National Life. You went to college for 4 years so you could sell life insurance. Again, there's a need for life insurance in our country, and yes, some people will get jobs selling life insurance, but certainly in our financial planning program at Western Kentucky University, we are not training people to be life insurance agents. We are training people to be comprehensive financial planners and hopefully fiduciaries as well. All right, so it's just some life insurance myths out there. Another slide. So here's what a typical job interview with a life insurance company says. How will you grow your book of business? They basically build what's called a book of business. How are you going to produce? How are you going to sell? How many people do you know? Give me an example of when you were able to use persuasion to change somebody else's mind. Are you financially prepared to go for your first 6 months without a paycheck? Because you're selling basically on a commission basis a lot of times. A lot of times I might give you $500 a month or even $1,000 a month for the first 6 months or a year or something like that. But then you find out that a lot of times they don't reimburse you for the use of your car and things like that. I've had students who have gone to work for insurance companies who made less than $10,000 their first year, and they put 50,000 miles on their car a lot of times. So big thing is list 50 or 100 people that you know and their salary ranges, because they want to hire you and have you go after your best friends and family that you know and use that relationship of that trust that you have with them and sell to them. And the way they figure it out is they can first test off if you can sell, and if you can just sell 2 or 3 very expensive policies, they've made money off of you, even after paying you a small commission and maybe some training money. So anytime somebody says, hey, we're going to have you list out a 50 or 100 of your closest family and friends, they're basically hiring you to sell life insurance. Actual reviews of jobs, no base salary, all commission based. You can go to glassdoor.com and check out reviews of jobs for different companies. Commission based, go back to school, idiot. You work for a general agent who controls your compensation. All commission, only cared about the top performers. And in fact, one of the problems that we have with with a lot of the life insurance companies is they'll say, hey, we want to hire 100 people, and if we are at the end, if we have somewhere between 5 to 15 of those left after 5 years, we call that a success. I don't call that a success. To me, a success is where you go to work for somebody and you have a 95% chance of staying there in a professional services firm. That's success. And the only reason you might want to leave is if you want to leave. All right. So, go on here. Some other reviews of jobs. I still hear no more than yes. My guess is you hear no a lot. You have to be very disciplined and willing to be uncomfortable. It's a tough business and made only for true entrepreneurs, true salespeople. And the commissions are very small once the company takes out for giving you outdated leads and office upkeep. Your car will go through a lot of wear driving to appointments. You feel like a telemarketer and a door-to-door salesman. So let's discuss life insurance. First off, you have to determine the need for life insurance that somebody needs. The best way of doing this is actually financial planning software. It's going to take into account current savings, current levels of investments people have, Social Security income. If someone dies and they have minor children, Social Security provides a benefit that is paid to the guardian of those minor children. It might be the other parent. And you have to consider the other spouse's income, whether that income might go up or more likely down if one spouse dies, because they may not be able to work as much. And of course, consider all their lifetime goals and the like. There's really no really good way. There's a lot of different ways of determining life insurance need, and we have a course here on risk management and life insurance where you go through those different needs, different types of analysis. There are a lot of online calculators too. You can go online and see that. Don't use them. They rarely come out with a good answer. The answers vary completely. I've never seen a really good online calculator that does this. Yeah. Here's an alternative way that I basically use for clients under the age of 40. I determine the amount of income that has to be replaced, and then I multiply it by 30. Then I'll add any debt that they have, including mortgages, credit cards, car loans, and the like, and I'll add another $20,000 for funeral expenses. So, for example, let's take Jake. He's 35 years old. He makes $100,000 a year. He's married. His wife also works. They have a $220,000 mortgage, so they owe that on their house, and $60,000 in other debt. Jake pays taxes. The Social Security and Medicare trust fund taxes are out of his $100,000 are $7,650. He saves $18,000 in his 401k every year, so he's saving 18% of his salary. That's a good amount. The income that he needs to replace is the $100,000 minus his FICA taxes minus his 401k contributions. So basically, that's about $75,000, and then you multiply that times 30. Then you add the debt, and you add funeral expenses, and you come up with $2,550,000. And if I were to go to a client, I'd say your insurance need in this case is $2.5 million. Yeah. Now, there's types of insurance that we need to cover. Again, these are covered in much more detail in the insurance class. There's term life insurance. It's basically pure insurance. You pay every year. There's no cash value built up to it. There is something that's very important, however. That's the ability to convert it to a permanent policy at some future point. So, for example, if somebody gets term life insurance for a 20-year term, and that life insurance doesn't renew after the 20 years, but they can convert it to a permanent life insurance policy with the same company without going through a medical exam. If their health has declined a lot, then it might make sense to go ahead and convert it to some type of permanent insurance. Because basically life insurance is a gamble. It's not a gamble you really want to win, but it is a gamble. Then there are all types of permanent life insurance or cash value insurance where you put extra money into it. Whole life, there's universal life. There's also a variant of that called guaranteed universal life insurance. There's variable universal life and indexed universal life insurance. These are all types of insurance. We'll cover these a little bit. Term life insurance, you can get it for a year. Most of the time it's 10, 15, or 20 years, but there's 25-year and 30-year policies out there. A lot of times, 30, 40 years ago, insurance used to be paid with an increasing premium where your premiums would go up a little bit every year. Most of the time nowadays, it's sold as level premium. So whatever your premium is, let's say it's $1,000 a year, you pay that for the entire 20-year period. Again, there's no cash value. So at the end of the 20 years, it's just like, paying for auto insurance, or if you don't have a car accident, you never use it, there's no value to it. Uh, Again, many term policies permit conversion to a permanent policy. Some policies say you have to convert within a certain time period, like it might be a 20-year policy, but you have to convert in the first 10 years. Uh, the better policies will say at any time during the term of this life insurance policy, you can convert. Permanent life insurance, the major reason to have life insurance is to replace lost income. That is the primary role of life insurance, and that's a temporary need because by the time you get to retirement, you're not replacing lost income. You have Social Security income, and of course that goes away if you die. But if you're married and a husband and wife and they both have Social Security income and one of them dies, the survivor, as a general rule, gets the bigger check, the bigger of those two checks. So there might be a small insurance need there, but hopefully they would have accumulated enough other assets to make uh, that adjustment. So hopefully they'll have retirement funds and the like. Another good reason for permanent life insurance is estate tax liquidity. There currently is a very high exemption from the estate tax. When I started practicing as an estate planning attorney, the exemption was only $600,000, and I was doing a lot of planning to minimize estate taxes. But now we have an exemption that's over 11.5 million in married couples because of something called spousal portability. If one dies, the survivor picks up the first person's exemption. The result is you have a $23 million exemption. There just aren't that many people in the United States that have over $23 million worth of net worth. Uh, but let's take an example of a couple, Bob and Josephine. They own a large family farm and associated small businesses. Their total net worth is $33,160,000. If both were to pass away, again, the exemption is effectively for them $23,160,000. So they have $10 million above and beyond that. That's taxed at 40%. That's the federal estate tax rate. Um, there are some states that also have state estate taxes. We'll ignore that for now. We'll study estate taxes later in this course. But so the result is they're going to need to come up with $4 million. The administrator of their estate or the trustee of their trust will have to come up with $4 million and pay that 9 months after they pass away. That's the deadline for filing something called a federal estate tax return. So they have $4 million in liquid assets, stocks, bonds, and cash. That is not in a 401k or an IRA because those would typically be paid to heirs or into trust. And if you force the money coming out of that forces a lot of income tax. So if they have liquidity, then one of the big questions is should they even have life insurance if they have liquidity that's for stocks and bonds and stuff that's not in uh, some type of tax deferred or tax free account like a Roth IRA or a 401k account. Because then the question would be, well, your total net worth is $33 million. Does it matter if your children get 33 million or 29 million? And they say, hey, it's okay to 29 million, and when sufficiently liquid, we don't really have to worry about coming up with cash. Our heirs won't have to worry about selling off assets quickly to pay the estate tax bill, and we really don't mind that our heirs get 29 million as opposed to 33 million, then they might not get life insurance. But if they're not liquid, if all of their money is tied up in businesses or tax deferred accounts, then they don't really have the cash that they can, their heirs or their estate or trust can come up with to pay that estate tax, and that might be a reason for having life insurance in that case. Um, so again, this just illustrates that if they have liquid assets, they may not want to get life insurance, but if they don't, they're likely to get what's called a joint and last to die policy. That keeps the insurance cost down if it only pays when both of them dies. They're likely to put a lot of money into it, and they're going to hold that in something called an irrevocable life insurance trust. Uh, Now, that's one way of doing it. We're going to study irrevocable life insurance trust in the last part of this course. Let's review the types of permanent insurance. One type is whole life insurance. Basically, whatever cash value that you have is invested. It becomes part of the life insurance company's assets, and life insurance companies maintain these huge reserves, and they invest those reserves mostly in long-term U.S. government bonds and highly rated corporate bonds, sometimes in real estate, sometimes in mortgages, and sometimes maybe a small amount even in stocks or stock mutual funds, basically very highly diversified. But most of it is usually either in mortgages or in government bonds or highly rated corporate bonds. Whole life insurance, the insurance company pays dividends on the amount of the cash value, and sometimes there's lower dividends. They're likely to be lower in future years because of the lower interest rates on bonds that are being bought by life insurance companies now. And possibly there could be higher mortality costs if the coronavirus does not be put under control when we have 1 million people die in the United States, heaven forbid. Then basically insurance companies are paying out a lot of claims, and the mortality costs that they have rise, and that would reduce their dividend rates substantially. Here are some historic dividend rates for different insurance companies. These are some of the largest insurance companies out there. Mass Mutual, New York Life, and Northwestern are all very sound financially companies. And what you can see is that the dividend rates, Northwestern Mutual 5%. Northwestern Mutual used to always be the top leader in terms of dividend rates. Mass Mutual is up there as well, 6.2% this year, 6.4% last year. But you can see that if you go back to the 1990s, dividend rates have come down quite a bit. And the reason for that is insurance companies go out and buy very long-term bonds. They go out and buy 30-year U.S. government bonds. If you were to go out and buy a U.S. Treasury bond 30 years right now, I think you would get somewhere around 1.4% interest on it. So as a result of these very low interest rates that we've seen over the last 10 years and continuing into today and the future, we're actually going to see dividends continue to go down in life insurance companies in all likelihood. They did go up a little bit here from 4.9% to 5%, but for the general trend is continuing downward. Yeah, and that's been the case for almost all the insurance companies there. Commissions on selling permanent life insurance are huge. A lot of companies will pay for whole life insurance 50 to 120% of the first year premium. So, for example, you sell a $2 million policy, the first year premium is $7,000 or $8,000. You, as a life insurance agent, could get paid like a first year premium 10 million, somewhere between 5,000 and let's say even $12,000 for selling that. You also get 30 to 50% of the second year premium in a lot of cases, and then 10% of the premiums for years 3 through 10. So the result of these very high commissions and other high costs that are embedded in these policies is that, let's say somebody puts in 10,000 a year for 10 years into a permanent life insurance policy, and it's invested. It's earning dividends, for example, maybe 5% a year. You would think that they would likely have, from doing the calculations, somewhere around not only the 100,000 in premiums paid, but a little more than that, maybe $200,000. But because of all these high commissions and other costs that are deducted from the insurance policy, they're likely to end up with only, after 10 years, the amount of the premiums that they paid, about $100,000 cash value. After that, they continue to pay premiums and the dividends. These policies can perform fairly well from a standpoint of that, but the first 10 years return on these policies is really lousy. So yeah, we got these greedy life insurance agents who love those high commissions, right? Here's just an illustration of the difference between term or pure insurance and whole life insurance. For somebody 30 years old getting a $500,000 policy, the premium might be $390, but for the same whole life policy, more than 10 times that. And that can go up depending on age of when you get it, and that's for a 30-year term policy and the like. Uh, Interesting enough, if you're 70, you can still get a 15-year term policy for 500,000. You pay 5,260. But these rates, by the way, assume that you're insurable, that you're not a smoker, and you probably get preferred rates. Another type of insurance policy is universal life. It's basically was issued a lot back in the 1980s and 1990s, and it pays interest. It basically, the cash value is invested in bonds and bonds alone, and the interest that's paid is very similar to the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield, which right now is somewhere right around 1%. So when these policies were first sold, interest rates in the United States were really, really high, and they were illustrating these policies that interest rates would continue to be high. Uh, the interest paid would be 10 to 13% indefinitely. And a lot of these policies have just imploded because they don't earn any interest and they haven't for a long time. Or much higher premiums have had to be paid into them to keep the policies in force. There's something called guaranteed universal life as opposed to non guaranteed. Basically, you can put a cash amount into a big policy. It's guaranteed to never go away until you reach at age 100 is most common, but nowadays they'll issue them up to 110 or even older. All right, and basically it's guaranteed to never go away regardless of market or interest rates. The problem is that you're going to pay a lot higher premium for that. Yeah. So another type of insurance is called variable universal life insurance, where the cash value that you have is actually held in a brokerage account of some type. It's not your own brokerage account, it's held at the insurance company. These are called separate accounts. They actually look like mutual funds, and there's usually 20 or more different mutual funds you can get. Most of the mutual funds are proprietary. For example, if you sell Prudential Variable Universal Life, there's going to be something called the Jennison funds, which is basically Prudential mutual funds, and they're fairly expensive. But there are some policies out there that have pretty low cost options in terms of their variable universal life. One of those, for example, is Jefferson National, which is a unit on Nationwide right now, although Nationwide looks like they're going to spin them off as a separate company. There are some others out there, not a lot of really low cost insurance policies, but there are some out there. Basically, you're shifting the investment risk here to the consumer to a big degree. And there's some bond funds in these and the like, but if you're doing this and let's say you're buying a cash value insurance and you're in your 30s, you're a doctor, you're putting a lot of cash in it, you have a very long term investment horizon, 30 years along, this kind of makes sense on the standpoint of where to put your money. Because over the long term, stocks are likely to significantly outperform the returns of whole life insurance. Uh, Not certainty, but over a 20, 30, even 40-year period of time, that looks like it would be very, very likely to happen with a very, very high degree of probability. The commissions paid are again a pretty heavy on these things. Not quite as heavy as for whole life insurance, but 70 to percent or so. Another type of insurance is index universal life. It's become quite popular because the cash values don't fluctuate anymore. Basically, let's say you put $10,000 into this policy, after commissions, whatever's left is invested with the insurance company. The insurance company basically pays dividends on it. It will pay an interest rate that's similar to what their dividends is, but usually a little bit less than that. And that some of that interest and possibly some of the principal is used every year to go out and buy call options on the various stock indexes. So if the stock index goes up, you basically can reap some of the benefits of that because you'll get some of the gains of the index going up. It's subject to caps, however, and participation rates. These caps and participation rates can be really low. It's certainly less volatile than stock investing, but the lower returns are basically reflective of the very high commissions on these policies. We have people who sell this type of insurance all the time, and they really don't explore the heavy fees and costs. And the illustrations that they give are often, in terms of the rate of return, showing 5 and 6% rate of returns when even in the best of times, these policies over a 10-year, 15-year period have not returned that. Um, so just looking at the growth potential and the volatility of the different types of investments. Universal Life is invested solely in bonds. Index Universal Life is invested with the insurance company, but it has call options on the index, so there'll be some upside in some years. And Variable Universal Life is invested essentially in mutual funds. So, in your Project 12, you have four hypotheticals. So let's just discuss one of them right now, give you a preview of it. Bo's a university professor, age 38. He makes $100,000 a year. Betty's the same. They're both in good health. Neither of them smoke. They are both good weight. They save $15,000 a year each in their 403b accounts, and after taxes, they spend most of the rest. They have two children, Mini Bo and Mini Betty, ages 5 and 3, and they both drive two Mini Coopers. And they reside in a home that they own. And if we could over here, $350,000 home, but they owe $160,000. Two cars, they owe some car loans on that. They have a checking account and they have a money market account for their savings. That is a fairly big cash reserve for them. And they have 403b accounts that have grown to $200,000 for their contributions. And they arrive at your office and they ask you, how much life insurance should we possess? You could do that calculation that we reviewed earlier, 30 times the income that you need to replace, and what types of insurance should they get. You would need to explain to them these different types of insurance versus term insurance, and then maybe explain that there's a conversion feature, then explains the four types of other insurance, and hopefully you would conclude that they need term insurance policies to be a lot cheaper for them, because all they need to do is replace their lost income. Now, their children are ages 5 and 3. They might want they're saving good amounts. They're 38 years old. You might ask them, when are you going to retire? And chances are that might be 20 years from now, 25 or 30 years from now. So you might get life insurance for 20, 30 years or so. All right. One of the interesting things is that you can actually go out and ladder the insurance, because they won't need as much insurance as time goes on, because they would have accumulated money in their investments accounts. So you could possibly buy 400,000 a 10-year term, 400,000 a 15-year term, 1.2 million a 20-year term. Total death benefit initially of $2 million there. That's one way of doing it. There's actually life insurance policies where you get one policy that can be structured this way, so you don't have to necessarily go out and get separate policies. Part of the answer is you need to explain the types of insurance, so like a couple of sentences, 2 or 3 sentences on each that explains how they're different from each other. All right. There's a problem with low interest rates again. Here's one where a couple paid $452 a month for life insurance, so that's about over $5,000 a year. The premiums on the policy that they have for 25 years started to rise because they held this universal life insurance. Interest rates came down, and all of a sudden they found out that to maintain that policy they had to increase their premiums a lot. People who bought universal life policies, who were guaranteed annual returns of 4% or more, are seeing their premiums soar, because the way they were illustrated again a lot of times back then was 10% rate of returns, 13% rate of returns on bond investments. Yeah. Life insurance companies love it when you don't keep a policy. So if a lot of life insurance companies count on the fact that, hey, somebody might get a whole life policy or some other type of cash value policy or even a term policy, and they'll let it lapse after a few years. A lot of cash value policies lapse. So they're basically off the hook in terms of providing the death benefit, and they've made some revenue there. 1 out of every 14 customers with term life insurance policies stop paying the premiums each year. And for those with permanent policies, 25% of policyholders stop making premium payments within the first 3 years, and within 10 years, 40% of them have let them lapse. So insurance companies love this because it improves their profits. All right. Here's some testimony from an insurance expert. He was associated with the Consumer Federation of America, And basically, he says state insurance commissioners who oversee insurance companies and the market conduct of insurance agents, how they do. Basically, very, very poor oversight. In this case, back in the 1980s and early 1990s, Prudential and MetLife faced really big fines for selling life insurance to unsuspecting nurses and also to teachers, by the way, as a retirement plan. And we're replacing good policies with less valuable policies to basically just earn commissions. And uh, despite the fact that I remember back in the mid 1990s, there were huge stories about this and all the abuses that took place with teachers and nurses and others. Uh, I still see this today. It has come back strongly. It's basically we're going to sell you life insurance. It's a form of a retirement income that you're setting up for yourself. Well, it just doesn't work. It's basically a tax trap. So, for example, Charlie has a variable life insurance policy. He's paid in $125,000 in premiums. It's got a cash value of $200,000. Now, one of the things about life insurance, it has an advantage to it. It's one of the few investments where you can pull out the basis first. He can pull out the $125,000. He can withdraw the amount of his contributions or premiums, not pay any tax on it, and then he can borrow against the policy. You have to kind of worry what is the interest that he has to pay back into the policy, and he also doesn't have to pay any income tax at that point. But if he does that, what happens is the mortality expenses go up. The amount of money that policy has to pay for the death benefit goes up because the cash value is lower. And the result of this is, as he gets older, basically this life insurance policy is going to lapse. And if he took out 200,000 over time, that's he's going to have to get a form that basically says he has to report $75,000 of income. So you don't want to basically save for retirement because it's really a tax trap. These strategies really don't work when you look at them and look at them big. Now, if you're an insurance agent, you're selling to somebody who's 40, 50 years old. By the time they discover it's a tax trap, they're going to be 70, 80, 90 years old, and you're going to be retired. You're going to live in a very comfortable house because you've sold a lot of expensive product and got paid a lot of commissions. So, some conclusions from this: rarely is there a permanent need for life insurance companies. One would be from an asset protection standpoint. There are policies out there for that, for doctors and others who are very high risk in terms of their potential liability. But a good financial advisor is going to find them very, very low cost policies, very low commission policies. Um, and another reason would be to provide estate tax liquidity. For 99% of the people out there, they ought to buy term life insurance. And so again, you as a student should be careful if you're recruited by a life insurance company or by its affiliated broker dealer. They'll say, hey, we're a brokerage firm, but they might be affiliated with Mass Mutual or another insurance company, and they say, well, you're going to be selling a lot of investments products. And then sometimes you go and you find out what you're really selling is 90% life insurance and annuities, which can be a very expensive and inappropriate product as well. And you only maybe sell 10% mutual funds, and even the mutual funds you sell aren't very good. Let's go back to asset protection planning. All right. I would just want to review the questions with you and kind of give you some that are in the Project 12 and give you some tips on it. Here, John and Mary Smith have the following assets. They have a Kentucky home. It's titled John and Mary Smith, for in turn of the joint lives with the remainder in fee simple to the survivor of them. That does not look like Tennessee Entirety's property. They have $50,000 in a joint bank account, $500,000 in John's 401k, and he wants to transfer that account. He wants to roll it over into an IRA account that you as a financial advisor will manage for them. He also has a contributory IRA account, which is now worth $750,000. And he's got a check payable to him from an insurance company, $5,000. John owns the car that his wife Mary drives. It's worth $15,000. John has just been in a car accident with that car. He was at fault. He severely injured 3 other people. His insurance company just sent him a letter saying that the claims are for $4 million, but his auto insurance liability policy only had 100,000. So here's some questions. Should John roll over his 401k into his existing contributory IRA account? Why or why not? Remember, we discussed earlier differences between contributory IRAs and rollover IRAs, and the fact that rollover IRAs have an unlimited exemption. But if you combine accounts, then you basically are limited to the contributory IRA exemption, which is less. If John files bankruptcy, can the bankruptcy trustee force a sale of their home? Well, in this case, if it was Tennessee by the entireties, the answer is no. All right. And should John and Mary do anything with the $50,000 cash before they file bankruptcy? Um, and what should they do? And that's kind of a interesting question for you. I'll address that when I give you the answers to it in terms of what people might want to do with cash from an asset protection standpoint. The next question is, you are starting a business with a partner named Joe Schmo. Each of you own 50% of the firm. It's a financial planning firm. If Joe was sued for giving bad financial planning advice, can the client go after the assets of the firm? Certainly. Can the client go after Joe's assets because he gave bad advice? The answer is yes. You're responsible for your own behavior. Can the client who sues go after your personal assets? Well, if you are set up as a limited liability company or a corporation, the answer is no. If you're set up as a general partnership, the answer might be yes. It would be yes. All right. But suppose Joe is sued for because of a car accident where he was driving his own car during a vacation, and a $500,000 judgment is obtained against him. Can the judgment credit seize Joe's 50% interest in the firm if the firm is a corporation, or if the firm is a limited liability company? And the answer is different for those. All right. And if the creditor can't seize the interest, can't foreclose upon the interest, discuss the fact that there's a charging order available. Should Joe Schmo have possessed umbrella liability insurance, and how much? How much would have solved this problem of just general liability arising from a car accident or somebody slipping and falling at your home? Umbrella liability insurance takes care of that. How much would you recommend for someone like Joe Schmo or you as a partner in that firm? And there's really no one answer to that, but it'd be interesting for you to think it through. Another question really relates to estate planning and the use of trust for protecting assets. We've talked about trust a lot. After a trust becomes irrevocable, if there's a spendthrift clause in that trust, and almost all trusts have that, they basically say creditors cannot get to this trust, is what it says. Then here we have a case where John Gold has $100 million. He's age 85. He's married to Jewel Gold, age 35. So he married someone a lot younger than him. Good for him, I guess. Maybe. All right. He wants to provide upon his death that some of his assets are used for the support of Jewel for the rest of her life. John is afraid of a gold digger who might want to marry Jewel for her money. I'm sure Jewel married him for his money. So Jewel likes to spend a lot of money too on jewels of all things. John wants the bulk of his assets to go to his child Jimmy, who is now age 10, the son of John and Jewel Gold. So John wants to protect Jimmy, however, from being a professional student all his life. He wants Jimmy to become a productive citizen. He also wants to protect Jimmy, just in case Jimmy got married by somebody and they got divorced within a few years. So, after paying all the estate taxes and the like, we'll assume that a trust for Jewel is $20 million is put in it, and a trust for Jimmy Gold is $30 million, and set forth ideas about this. All right. Now, you might want to explore, what is a unit trust for Jewel? What does paying a unit trust amount to Jewel look like? You might want to do some online research. For Jimmy, you might want to look at incentive trust. Do a little online research about how incentive trusts can be set up. For example, matching income or giving somebody an incentive to achieve certain goals in life, like graduating from college or like starting a business. And then you also might want to discuss what a limited power of appointment might look like. Jewel might have a limited power of appointment where she says, when I die, Jewel can specify where the money goes as long as to Jimmy or Jimmy's heirs. All right, or perhaps a little larger set of people. And Jimmy might be given the same thing so that he could say whatever's left in the trust when Jimmy dies, he could specify goes into trust for his wife or goes in trust for his children or something like that. So you may want to research these ideas of a unit trust. What is a unit trust payout? What is an incentive trust? And what is a limited power of appointment? Now, the class preparation assignment, Project 12, is 44 pages long. It discusses some of these, but I would encourage you to look online for some additional ideas there. So that's all for this. Look forward to giving you my answers to it in the days ahead. Thank you.